Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
How often have you seen strange, even astounding coincidences in your life? Is there some meaning, purpose, or power behind them? Are they coincidences at all?
Hey there, and welcome to the 548th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I am Ben, and those lofty questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. And this evening we have a very distinguished guest with us on a subject that concerns everyone, but is seldom covered. And we welcome your calls this evening. Of course, the numbers are 401-766-1240, that's locally, or anywhere from U.S. or Canada, 800-449-1240.
Our guest this evening is one of the greatest names in the paranormal, and this is his second appearance on the show. UFO and paranormal pioneer, author and publisher and producer Timothy Green Beckley, a.k.a. Mr. UFO, is probably the longest-standing and most famous of all UFO investigators. He says that the paranormal has been part of his life since childhood. He reports having his first out-of-the-body experience at age 6 and saw his first 3 UFOs at the age of 10. In the early 1970s, he founded the UFO Investigators League, and over the years has written over 30 books on everything from rock music to the secret majestic 12 UFO papers. Inner Light, Global Communications, Conspiracy Journal, Abelard, and other names are imprints of Tim's publishing company. He keeps the rarest and most unique books on the subjects of conspiracies, UFOs, aliens, giants, Bigfoot, etc. in print and available for all researchers. His works are the source material for a number of History Channel shows on UFOs, aliens, Men in Black, Ancient Aliens, and more. He is the author of Mystery of the Men in Black, the UFO Silencers, with an intro by the late, great John Keel. And as I understand it, beginning today and lasting through Friday, we understand that his book, UFOs, Wicked This Way Comes, The Dark Side of the Ultra-Terrestrials, is available free online, and we'll ask Tim about that. Hopefully I got it right. His websites include www.hiddenmysteries.com, TeslaSecretLab.com, and ConspiracyJournal.com, which, when I last looked, I was surprised to see had a quote from me in the homepage. So,
all right, so Tim Beckley, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Well, this is the second time on your show, but the third time on your station.
Oh,
because
really?
I was one of the first shows that I ever did, where I actually had to travel out of town. In those days, there was no internet. In fact, we were still using 20-cent postage stamps. Joe Ferrier, of course, who was on the station there for many years, was a friend of mine, and he had me up in the studio. And in fact, I was just thinking the other night, there was a newspaper called Midnight, which is now the Globe, sold at the checkout counter in the supermarket. And there was a photo of me and Joe besides the microphone. And I was so young, I had a crew-cut black horn rimmed glasses, and I still had acne on my face.
Oh, my ears and whiskers.
I don't know how old I was, but it was, my late teens or even before that, perhaps. So I'm an old champion of wound, and I'm glad to be on. And yes, I am giving away a free book. Aren't I crazy?
Oh, that's all right. Well, tell us. Well, it's wonderful to have you back.
Oh, yeah.
Joe is still.
It's so good. It's so good to be back with you guys. You have one of the top-rated shows on the paranormal, and one of the few people in the, well, I call it business, but it's hard to call any of this what we do a business. One of the most sensible minds and sensible approaches to all this weirdness.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. That's we do try to reach that standard. But
you try to levitate less than 2 feet above the ground.
If we 3 feet, if we can do it.
We did have.
Although I know Ben is doing more than that when your back is turned, Paul.
When you least expect it.
Yes, but unfortunately he doesn't remember, so neither of us knows about it.
Yeah.
Only the director knows for sure.
That's how he reached the cookie jar when he was a kid.
Is that what it was?
I didn't want to tell you.
Oh, okay. Well, statute of limitations is up.
Yeah,
but Joe Ferrier is still very much loved and very much missed around Northern Rhode Island here, and it's. I remember you having said that last time you were on.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm doing a column for a new website. It's called UFO Press. And what I do is I'm reviewing the various websites and providing links for people. So as they read along the column, they can click on the link or cut and paste or whatever, copy and paste, and go right to the spot. So I have that linked up with show number, I believe it's 2009 show 60 or 20. There's two numbers there. So people can just and hear that very important show that you did, which is the only place that they can hear Joe's voice, as far as I know, still left on the internet anywhere.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That has more hits than most of the shows for that year.
Yes. Mysteries of the Valley, I think it is, or something.
Mysteries
like
of Blackstone Valley. That's our Blackstone Valley Mysteries.
I was listening to that last night as I toss and turn in my loft bed here. So there you go. He's got a couple of great stories there. But anyway, on with the evening.
Okay,
Great.
Very good. Ben's going to start us off.
Indeed. So, Tim, the Renaissance man that you are, we can talk about anything with you, as this first 6 minutes has indicated. But this evening,
a lot of things are nothing at all. That's right. I'm right here with you.
Indeed. So we're gonna concentrate mostly on synchronicities. So first, what's the difference between a synchronicity and a coincidence?
Or is there a difference?
If there is, I don't know what it is. Synchronicities, have played a large part in my life lately. It's getting really totally bizarre, and I've become convinced that synchronicities are the next EVPs and maybe some type of code, just like you would find in a crop circle. And there's more. It's more than just a random chance. I mean, these bizarre things, and I'll explain what some of them are as we go along. I think somewhere out there, someone or something is facilitating the show. Now, I call them the management, but some people might call them God or a creative force. Philip K. Dick, the famous science fiction writer,
one of my favorite writers.
Yeah. He had a number of incidences that were synchronicities or coincidences that were very bizarre, including the appearance of a woman at the door, and when he opened the door, he got shot with some sort of pink ray enveloped him, and he started having all these bizarre things happening in life. And Charles Fort, the famous writer who collected all sorts of bizarre scientific tidbits, like the fall of frogs and fish and animal matter from the sky and mysterious disappearances. He said that life on Earth was kind of like a cosmic chess game, and that we were but pawns for something else in the universe. And that's what I've come to believe, that there is something out there that is either setting us in a direction or has a message for us that we have to decode, or at least is trying to convince us of their existence. Guys, it's like here SETI tries to send out and receive radio signals from the stars. But suppose they don't listen to your show out there. I mean, or they don't listen to anybody's show. We're thinking that they're sitting there with earphones bouncing around in some bubble, listening to top 40, and perhaps they don't enjoy that. Perhaps they have another way of communicating, and I think that other way is through synchronicities. Now, it could be that they're not from out there. I'm more inclined to believe that a lot of what's going on is not a celestial phenomena, but is a terrestrial phenomena. And so synchronicities just keep playing a big, a portion of my life. Now, let me tell you this is a really strange, at least to me, thing that happened recently. On Memorial Day, I was with my associate, Carol Rodriguez, who has been my assistant, and she's a great artist. She's been with me for many, many years. And it was such a nice day, and I don't get out. I've had a few, health problems. And so we decided, well, I'm in the middle of Manhattan here, just not too far from the Empire State Building.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, well, why don't we go over to this very nice park that just opened on the East River? It's the Hudson Park. And it's right on the river, and they've just done a lot of construction on it, and a lot of tourists are going there, and they've got restaurants and so forth. And I said yes, but I don't have a car, and it's a little bit too far to walk. She said, oh, we'll just take the crosstown bus. Well, in Manhattan, it cost $250 to get on the bus.
Really?
$250, yes.
I haven't ridden the bus in Manhattan in about 40 years.
Well, neither have I, actually. Very, very few times. I'm a big cab man, but it would have been a little expensive to go from one, to where I am to all the way over to like 11th or 12th Avenue, where the park is. So she said, "Oh, if you show your credentials that you're a senior citizen, which I am at the moment, you get on for half price. So that's $1.25." And I said, "Oh, geez, well that's okay." So we got to the bus stop, and you have to show ID to the bus driver and throw the change in the little bucket or change collector, whatever they have there. So now I had it in my pocket in a little cup that I use as a purse. You can rattle and hear the change in there. And so I told Carol, I said, hold on to my ID for me while I fish around for the money. So I have the money in my hand, and she says, "Oh, one of those coins is a Canadian coin, and the bus driver will get mad and throw you off, not allow you on the bus if you try to put it in the change collector, and also it won't fit, I guess, because it goes by weight or something." So I said, "Well, hold on to all of this while I find another quarter." So finally, I got my 5 quarters together, and I threw it in a little change thing there, and it goes cling, 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 and we sat down. So before I got on the bus, I didn't know what to do with the Canadian coin, right? I didn't want to throw it out. I mean, that seems like a waste of money, even though I didn't want to put it back in with the coins because I'd end up doing the same thing again. So I took that Canadian silver piece, and I put it on the little bench at the bus stop where you would sit until the bus comes, right? All right. I said, maybe there'll be a tourist from Canada, and they'll see it and pick it up and take it back to Toronto or something. So that's what I did. Got on the bus, we sat down, and it took maybe 7 or 8 minutes to get over to our destination. I get off the bus, and as I get off the bus, I see something shining on the sidewalk. I picked it up. It was an American quarter. It would have been on the exact spot where the bus bench would have been if there had been a bench there, but since there was no bench, it was on the ground. So I left a Canadian quarter before I got on the bus, and there was my quarter back in American change on the on the ground. So I figure with the rate of exchange, I might have come out about $0.015.
Maybe about that, yeah.
Ahead on that, yeah.
Just
like the bankers do at night, they exchange money or something like that. So now, come on, that can't, that's not a coincidence. I mean, you don't leave a quarter when you get on the bus and find one when you get off the bus, unless somebody's playing a little trick with you, up there. And something like that's kind of like totally out of the realm of coincidence, and as a synchronicity happens, it seems almost on a regular basis.
Well, speaking of Canada, Tim, I can tell you an amazing lately, my life has been full of coincidences too. And when I say lately, I mean really the past 5 to 10 years.
One thing, I've started to work on an article, putting all this together. I don't know if I'm going to sit here and write a book on it. You mentioned I've done 30 books. Actually, since I'm a publisher, I've done about 200 books.
Yeah, yes.
I'm about washed out as far as as that goes. In fact, I always tell people, if you want to know what we've published, just go to Amazon and type in Timothy G. Beckley, and all our authors from T. Lomsink Rampa to Commander X to Tim Schwartz to Sean Castile will pop up and amaze you with the diversity. But go ahead with your story, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm big into family history, as Ben will tell you. I bored him for hours with the stories of the ancestors, but
it's not boring. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, that's true. There's quite a few characters in our line, anyway.
Yeah.
So, several months ago now, I had sent in my dues for an organization that has 300,000 members in Canada. That's Canadian-based, as a veterans organization. And so I sent that in. And then 2 days later, I happened to be looking for a particular ancestor online, and there was one lonely posting from a fellow who had originally been from Nova Scotia, where my grandmother was from. And he had put a posting on about this fellow in 2010. So here it is, 2014, and I'm finally answering. And he was amazed. It came back. He turns out to be a relatively close cousin, pardon the pun, relatively close cousin of mine. And he is the registrar, or works in the registrar's office of the organization I had just sent my dues in for, in Ottawa, right? And what is the chance of that having happened? I mean, you couldn't have planned that. And so they came down to Woonsocket here on their way back from Nova Scotia. He lives in Ottawa, but they're from Nova Scotia, and we had just a lovely, lovely visit. Wonderful people, and we're great friends now. And all because of that. Now, one might say, well, the Internet is simply an instrument that hadn't existed before, and there's all sorts of information flow, and people and things you would never have known about before are readily accessible. So maybe that's an explanation. But when it comes to these synchronicities and/or coincidences, Tim, what do you think there really is some kind of, as you say, code behind this, and what's behind that?
Yeah, well, when you say code, see, I'm not sure. Like you say, what are they trying to tell us? Maybe they can't tell us anything. Again, we're waiting for that radio signal, and it's almost like the electronic voice phenomena. You get, let's face it, you get some messages, but it's a lot of gibberish usually, or sometimes, right? I mean, it doesn't have anything really to do necessarily with the house that you're investigating. If it's got a ghost in it, it just picks up random messages to tell you. So it's like somebody saying, "Hey, I can't come down and shake your hand," or "I can't talk to you on the telephone, but I can do something that will indicate that that this is that I'm real, or we're real, or whatever it is." Now, John C. Lilly, who wrote he claimed that he spoke with dolphins, or he learned how to communicate with them. He said he had so many coincidences in his life. He said that he felt that there was some sort of coincidence review board. I mean, he saw it as an actual, like some sort of interdimensional, structure or existence in some other, realm. I don't know. I'm still searching for the answers here. Now, one of the things that happens all the time, which really pushes the envelope, is these synchronicities where I run into people that I shouldn't run into thousands of miles away from home. Now, in fact, this case here, this incident here that I'm going to relate, was the first synchronicity that I noticed, because it blew my mind. Now, I was speaking in San Francisco, where I had never been before. This is many, many years ago. I was giving a lecture on UFOs for the National UFO Congress of Scientific Ufology, which was run by Jim Moseley, who just passed away. But the organizer that year was a young fellow by the name of Dale Reddick. Now, we had all started out as a teenage ufologists, and now we're a bunch of old men. But anyway, so I was in San Francisco, and I gave this talk. We had a nice attendance, and people were up in the balcony and all of that, and I guess I gave a nice show there. And the next day, it was time for me to go back to catch a plane to head back to Newark Airport. But we had some time to kill before going to the airport, so there were about, I guess, maybe 4 or 5 of us, the promoter and his wife and a few other people, I guess, who was kind of the inner circle of the group. And we all decided to go out and have brunch. It was a Sunday, around noon. Now, I was not familiar with San Francisco. I had not been there before. And the people I was with, we picked a place at random. It wasn't anywhere that they had been either. So we're sitting down and having a Bloody Mary, because what else do you have on a Sunday at brunch? And I happened to just, we're just chatting, idle conversation, and I said to the promoter and the other people, I said, geez, it's a shame. I know a few people here in San Francisco, but I never thought to call them, and I was coming into town. In particular, there was a fellow by the name of Alan Vaughn who had moved from New York to San Francisco to take a job as editor of a magazine called Psychic. That's when there were newsstands and publications and all those wonderful things that you could actually pick up a glossy publication. And he was a good friend of mine. I had one of the first metaphysical centers in New York in the late 60s and early 70s, and he had quite a reputation as being a very good psychic, and had been written up in quite a number of newspapers and things like that. There were no ghost hunters really in those days, except maybe Hans Holzer.
Yes.
I think he was the only recognizable name. And I said, geez, it's a shame that I didn't call Alan, because in addition to him being a good friend, he was very entertaining. I mean, he had a good sense of humor. He was somebody you could like for just more than just being a paranormal researcher. Lo and behold, 5 minutes later, the front door to this restaurant bar that we're in swings open, and this gentleman comes in with a dog on a leash. And I look at him and I said, that can't possibly be Alan Vaughn, because I'm 3,000 miles away from home, and I have just been speaking about him. He looks at me, I look at him, I motion him over, and I said, aren't you Alan Vaughn? And he says, yes, I am. I said, well, what are you doing here? And I explained the circumstances, that I had been here lecturing, and I was just talking about him. And he said, I was just walking my dog, and I had never been in this place before, and I felt like having a beer. And Alan liked his Budweiser, and so he sat down at the table, and we had a good little laugh about this. And I said, by the way, Alan, what are you working on these days? Because like I mentioned, he was moved to San Francisco to become editor of this magazine, but he also wrote some paperback books and all. And he said, geez, I'm working on a book on coincidence and synchronicity, and I guess this is going to be in it. So if you can find that little paperback book by Alan Vaughn, and this, my copy here on the shelf that I can't get to because I built a loft bed around my bookcase, is somewhere up there collecting dust and turning very brittle, those little paperback pulp books, But if you find it, I think it's case number 17 in the book. Now, this has happened to me repeatedly. There was a fellow by the name of Harry Levelson. He was the UFO editor or space editor of Omni magazine, which has been out of business for many, many years. That was Bob Guccione's attempt to come out with a science fiction, paranormal type of publication. It didn't last very long because it wasn't very good, to be honest with you. But Harry wrote the UFO column. Now, Harry wanted to get out of the rat race, so he moved from Manhattan to Miami, South Beach. Harry didn't like telephones. He never had one, or at least after he moved out of New York, he never had one. Well, whenever I went to South Beach, right on the ocean there, because I love the water, being a Cancer, every time I went to South Beach, and Harry lived within about maybe 3 or 4 blocks of the beach, I would run into him. I mean, I'm not just talking about once. Almost every time I was down there, I would run into him. He was just kind of in the, just roaming around. I guess he went to the post office, which was about maybe in the area where all the hotels were. So, never lost track of Harry until he passed away. And so and this has happened. I don't know, just maybe 5 or 6 times of running into people that I didn't know where they were, and I'd find them on the street or find them in a train station. One time, Antonio Huneeus, who's a top-notch UFO researcher originally from Chile, he was going to a conference, I forget now, maybe in Boston or Philadelphia, and we didn't have cell phones or anything like that. See, I said, well, I'd be really anxious to know how the conference turned out, where where a lot of people there or anything like that. And he said, I'll call you in a couple of days when I get back from Philadelphia. Anyway, I'm about to get on a train at the Penn Station, and here comes Antonio off the train. I say, how was the show, by the way? So I didn't have to call him on the phone because I was leaving town, but he was there and he gave me the details. 5 or 6 times. This just cannot be a coincidence. You just don't run into people 3,000 miles away from home, or tell somebody you want some information, and they appear majestically in front of you.
Oh, so true. Well, that's perfect timing, Tim, because we're going to take our break at this point. And you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back with our good friend and fascinating guest, Tim Beckley. Stick with us. Okay, and before we get back to our very interesting guest and conversation about synchronicities, I wanted to remind you of several of the charities Ben and I have adopted. There is USA Cares, usacares.org, does terrific things for veterans and their families, financially speaking, if they're short of money for a particular event or particularly a mortgage, things of that kind, out goes a check for them. And our friends to the North, Canadian Veterans Advocacy as well. Mike Blaze in Ontario started this organization, does great things from the legislative point of view, trying to help Canadian veterans as well who have been with us in Afghanistan since the beginning. Also, Youth Mentoring Connection in Los Angeles. Tony LeRae out there has done amazing things with young people by helping them with indigenous wisdom. Now, this isn't crazy or a cult or anything like that. He just uses the good sense of some of the oldest peoples on Earth to help at-risk youth, and he has had amazing results. So check that out, youthmentoring.org. So let's get back to our great guest, Tim Beckley, paranormal legend. Now, Tim, we get a couple of things from listeners on a relatively consistent basis. One is the feeling, and they always, as people usually do, they always think they're a little bit nuts, and of course that's something people might feel when they have strange experiences. But one is that they don't feel as though they really belong here. Sometimes they'll say they really don't feel as if they're actually belonging in the human species even. Now, these are not nutballs. I mean, these are ordinary people, surely. And that sort of thing. And the second thing is that they feel, as we've already touched on, that something is sort of pulling strings or guiding them.
As you sort of mentioned.
Yes, and sometimes they'll attribute it to angels or whatever things in folklore might come through to explain that. So those two things seem to be themes.
Yes.
From our point of view, and I'd like your comment on this, I think we often don't feel that we belong here because our point of view. We tend to stick with this multiverse idea, and you're living in many different places. It's all kind of one big you, and sometimes it's not entirely balanced as far as your perception and consciousness is concerned. So maybe you feel like you belong somewhere else because that's where you really are, and that's home. In other cases, the whole idea of feeling control beyond yourself, I think one possibility might be that your other aspects of yourself that are coming through your subconscious from parallel existences might be in a position to help you or to pull some strings or whatever you want to call it. And that might be a factor in there. I mean, what say you about what's behind that sort of feeling or experience?
Well, now, a lot of people do ask me, they say, well, did you ever have, you must have had an abduction experience, or you must be a star child or something like that. And you always say, well...
you haven't got one of those big heads, do you?
Well, perhaps sometimes too big for my own good, but not that's noticeable. Part of it is in another dimension, I guess. But, I always tell those people, well, maybe pick up a book by Brad Steiger because... The Star Children, of course, that was his concept. That's more up his alley. In fact, do I feel that I belong? Yeah, I kind of, and we all have our good and bad days, but I've always kind of liked it around here. I mean, surely you can't levitate like I can't levitate like Ben can, or read minds like you, Paul, but I do have my, pluses here. And I think that I am, and I just say this, I have no proof, but yes, I think that I am here to, I wouldn't say teach others because I'm no messiah or even a guru, but I think I'm here to exchange information and just like UFOs, to make people think. I would hope that I could, touch people in a way where maybe they'll pick up a book. Because how many other people are publishing these days? I mean, especially in this field, it's kind of a bygone, thing to publish. It's all on the Internet. Not that we're not on the Internet. I have my own TV channel, I guess you call it that, on YouTube. It's Mr. UFO's Secret Files. I travel around the country, and I take my camera with me, and I've been giving out free DVDs with my books, but I decided, well, heck, let's put them all in one spot. So I've done that. But the paranormal, since I was a kid, and you mentioned the angels, I had an experience that I guess something saved my life. Now, I can't prove it's a guardian angel. I'm not a very religious person, so spirits, yes. Angels, yeah, I was with my parents, and we were in a car. My mother would go. She had a breathing problem. She had asthma and all very bad. In those days, you went to places where there were no allergies or whatever, right? So one of the places was Kentucky. Don't work anymore, but we get into our car, and we would drive for maybe 2.5, 3 days down to near Louisville. My father was from there. My mother was born in the East Coast here. But she liked to travel, and we had family there. And so we take the Oldsmobile, and 1949 Oldsmobile.
Oh,
and they would sit me up in the back of the car. I had some little toys. I was about 3 years old, set me up in the back of the car, and had some blankets and toys and stuff back there to whittle away the time. And I always like to travel. I mean, to this day, I don't mind getting on a bus. People say, "Oh, you can't afford to go on an airplane." No, man, I like to see the scenery, So I'd get in the car, and we'd travel down there. My father did most of the driving, and my mother probably bickered with him most of the way down there. Because I guess she didn't like his driving or thought he was a good driver or something like that. But once you get out of the area, especially in those days, I mean, traffic wasn't like it is today. So I guess on the third night, we would have been getting pretty close, to Kentucky or our destination. And as I understand it, we were up in the kind of in the mountains or up in the winding roads, and it was getting a little bit foggy out. And my father wanted to continue driving and get the heck out of the car, I guess, and just call it quits, And maybe there was only another hour and a half or 2 hours to go, but the fog was moving in and the sun was down. And my mother insisted that he stop on the spot. And if my mother said something, he did it. And so he stopped the car, and I guess I was sleeping in the back, and they were in the front. And when the sun rose and the fog cut through the fog, we were on the edge of a cliff. And as I understand it, if we had moved another foot or two, I would not be here today speaking with Paul and Ben. Wow. I would be levitating with wings or something like that. So
no doubt.
There's an incident, I mean, at a very tender age of 3, where something did seem to have some impact. Maybe I did come from somewhere else and I wandered in. I have no recollection of that, and that doesn't particularly interest me at all. But I do think we do have some sort of guidance, on and off throughout our lives, and that we all have a direction, just like you fellows would be the psychic thing and being on the radio. You've done how many shows, did I hear you say?
This is, I believe, the 548th, not counting special shows.
Oh, my goodness. That doesn't include all the good programs on Bentwaters?
No, that was 16 hours separately, so if anybody has the time, they can go and listen to
I've listened to those shows numerous of times, I must say. But, there's something, there's a guiding hand, and just like Charles Fort said, we're but, puppets on a string, and there's some marionette up there maybe dancing us around from, time to time.
Well, there you
go. Also, my grandfather on my father's side of the family saw a headless horseman.
Really?
Yeah. Well,
I must say I've never seen one of those. Ben?
I don't have any great details about it, but my father came from a rural area, and his daddy, they were born in, raised and lived all their lives in Shelbyville, Kentucky, which is the home of was the home of Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, we have a relative near there. Yeah.
The chicken magnet.
Yeah.
I don't know if a chicken is a magnet, but
depends how much iron they've ingested.
Yeah. Anyway, as I understand it, Grandpappy was out doing some late evening chores, and he was behind the barn, and here comes a headless horseman. I mean, what else can you say? People say, well, there are. I've looked it up, and I'm no authority on it, but there seems to be a lot of cases of headless horsemen. Now, there were. I believe Kentucky was a neutral state during the Civil War, but there were some skirmishes around there, so we assumed that either a Union or a Confederate soldier, unfortunately, was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the cannonball caught him in a very bad spot, and that's what it was.
No, that'll do it.
I don't know. I mean, that's the story. And my grandfather and father were very religious. They were Baptist, and they didn't like to talk about it because they thought a lot of this was the work of the devil.
Exactly, yeah.
And which brings us up to UFOs Wicked This Way Come. Now, that's the book that I'm giving away, or at least the Kindle edition. It's an essay, a dossier, a book. It's like 300 pages on sort of the dark side of things that go on in ufology. You hear about cases of people having friendly contact with the Space Brothers and being healed on board UFOs and some of these very nice, fuzzy, cozy thing, but not all UFO beings or pilots or crew members or interdimensional swordsmen are necessarily ETs. In fact, some of them are tricksters and maniacal and tell you things that aren't necessarily true. So I put that down in a book. I have a whole series. It's the UFO Fear Factor. Not that I'm opposed to the friendly, guys from outer space. Don't get me wrong. I know friends of mine channel Ashtar and the UFO Command, and we have books on that as well. But in order to promote a book, every month or so, we offer a Kindle edition of one of our up-and-coming titles. So today until Friday, if you go to Amazon and you go type in UFOs-Wicked This Way Come, and just put Tim Beckley after it, because then you'll find it real quick. And you get the Kindle edition. You can click on it for free. And so far, before I came on the air, I checked, we had already given away 225 books. Today, I guess it started like at 8 a.m. this morning, and I'm hoping that we can give away 1,000 books, Kindle editions of the books. And Kindle books can be read on any computer, I understand it. So there you go. And it's a very interesting and entertaining book. We pull no punches, and there are other researchers besides me in there. There's Sean Castile and Peter Robbins, who talks about some of the premature deaths of UFO researchers who seem to have come under the spell of maybe the Men in Black that I've written about. So it's there. Just type it in, get your Kindle edition, or pay for the printed version if you'd like, and there you go.
Well, I know what I'll be doing after the show.
Well, reading, that's good.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's it. As a writer, one has to read, and you'd be amazed the writers that don't seem to know that. But in any case, I'm kind of with you, Tim, on the sort of not trusting these little gray guys, so to speak, if that's indeed what they are.
Yes.
Things are never what they appear to be in the paranormal. Now you've touched on the next question.
You're one of the few, one of the few that realize that. Now, I say what goes on inside a haunted house and inside the seance room is very similar to what goes on at a UFO landing site.
Precisely.
Well, you have the levitation. Sorry, Ben. you have the levitation. People are levitated into UFOs all the time and then thrown back on the ground. You've got cases of people going through walls. You have the woman that, down here in Lower Manhattan that went through her wall and ended up inside of it. Inside the spaceship. Well, how about Douglas Hume floated outside the window and came in the other window. You've got all kinds of apparitions in a seance room and in a haunted house. You've got the same thing in a UFO. It's all pretty much the same ball of wax. Now, I know Stanton Friedman and these other guys that believe that this is all extraterrestrial say that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do, because I see the subject from a complete point of view.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, being interested in in fact, you know, I noticed last night I was listening to a podcast with Cameron Grant. He's the Canadian who's written about all the president. I don't know if he's been on the show, but
no, we don't know him. Unfortunately, we will.
Oh, you got to get him on the show now. He started on last night, and I always thought of him as a nuts and bolts type of guy. Well, he went on and said that how he had seen in government documents, because he goes to all the presidential libraries and studies all this stuff, he saw in a lot of the early classified reports that are now released where the government was talking about it's all ESP, it's all mental telepathy. And that's why they can't explain this to the public, because the public doesn't understand mind-to-mind communication, and they would think that they were demons. I guess a lot of people would think that. Well,
sure.
To me, I don't think of demons in the sense of Satan sitting on a throne and hurling a pitchfork at you or something. I think of demons more in the sense of Aleister Crowley's spirits and falling angels and things like that. Well, fallen angels were just interdimensional beings of some sort. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think certainly. Now it's funny you mentioned what you've mentioned in the past 5-10 minutes, because we're speaking at 2 UFO conferences, and we're going to talk about precisely that. And I don't know if a lot of these people will have heard that before. And we have the greatest respect for Stan Friedman. He's a dear friend. As a matter of fact, he's writing the preface for our next book. But he's he is pretty much a nuts and bolts guy, and we respect that. Maybe he's right. But I think other points of view can be introduced, and we're kind of planning to do that.
Here's a story I heard the other night for the first time. I have a podcast that I do. I'm a co-host every once a month, second Sunday of once a month, and I picked a guest. So I picked this fellow. His name is Harry Drew. And he's lives in the town of Kingman, Arizona. Now, back in 1953, there were a series of UFO crash landings. Unlike Roswell, he said it didn't dig itself in the ground, it didn't fall, but it landed there. And now, the incident is known about. It's been written, but it's been poo-pooed, and people think in general that it's a hoax. But this fellow is not he's not a ufologist. He's actually a local historian. So he found at least 15 people in the town of Kingman who witnessed this landed craft. The military apparently came in and put it on a flatbed truck and then floated it across the river in Colorado, and eventually it ended up in Area 51. Okay, so there you figure there's a physical a craft, nuts and bolts, must have come from Saturn or, across the universe or something. But no, then Harry goes a step further. By the way, the show is called The Outer Edge. It's not archived yet, but it's a good show, and you ought to have him on. But anyway, he tells a story about not only the crashed or landed UFO, but there were alien survivors. Okay, so the sheriff took two of the aliens disappeared, right? Now, I don't know. They vanished, I guess. No, in fact, they got into something that looked like an ambulance, but it wasn't an ambulance, and they took off. They never saw them again. Anyway, the sheriff got a hold of 2 of them, and I guess he was keeping them in, let's laugh at this, protective custody, right? So he takes them, and he's got an office underground, a cell, I don't know, a lockup. Underground. So he takes the aliens in protective custody, and he puts them in this little room, locks the door carefully, very tightly, and comes back a little while later. I don't guess they were waiting for the cup of coffee, and if they were waiting to make a phone call, I don't know how much long distance would have been in those days to wherever they came from. But so anyway, he comes back, he opens the door, they're gone. They must have walked through that wall. Either that, or they made him think that they were locked in that room, and they really weren't. Well, that sheriff and his deputy looked all over the place. And it was a small room. There was only a couple of chairs and a table in it. And they looked under the table. The aliens weren't there, and they either cloaked themselves and made themselves invisible and walked out around them, or they were never there to begin with. Doesn't mean the guy was lying. they had to put the alien eye on him, not the evil eye, but the alien eye on him, I guess, and made him believe that they were in that room, and they weren't. So they disappeared and were never seen again.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I'm thinking also of Nigel Kerner from the UK, who was a UFO researcher and believes more or less along the same lines that the grays particularly are perhaps biomechanical and not necessarily entirely biological units, and that they are up to no good.
Well, the thing is, I always find it weird that when people are talking about their experiences, like being abducted, and they start like saying, "Oh, well, they're here to help us and stuff, and they're just nice, and they just want to get us up to our higher selves or whatever." It's like, why? I don't understand how we can derive human morals, social mores, and like human traits of just being nice to completely alien creatures. That's just one thing that just boggles my mind.
That bothers me too.
Like, I don't.
You're right. Why would anybody else's behavior be necessarily the same behavior that we would have? That doesn't make too much sense to me. And so, a lot of our fellow ufologists are waiting for disclosure. Well, what is the government going to disclose? That there are alien bodies? Well, I'm not sure that there are alien bodies, and even if there is, there may be 3 or 4 people in the entire military that even know about this, because lo and behold, even Clinton, who actually was a fairly strong believer in UFOs, or interested in he sent one of his representatives to find out 2 things: did a UFO crash in Roswell, and who was behind the JFK assassination, and he found out nothing. The president is not bought. He's brought into the briefing room, and he's told whatever he should be told.
That's right.
He doesn't have any. Now, Ronald Reagan might have been the exception. He seemed to have had an interest in the subject. His wife was into astrology, and he had a couple of UFO sightings. So maybe he knew a little bit about it, but we assume that nobody really has very few people have the answer, and the answer is so unorthodox that how does Obama or anybody go on TV at 6 o'clock and say, "Fellas, this is the way it is," because people are not going to stand for that, and they're not going to understand it. A hedge fund manager is not going to know about walking through walls. It just isn't part of their concept. And people are taught, of course, in the universities, far and wide, that things like walking through walls and Ben's levitation just does not happen.
Well, there you go.
And so nobody is going to go on TV and announce this to the world. The only time that this will happen is when they, whoever they are, decide it's time to give up pardon the expression, the ghost, and come clean. But again, since they are not operating on the standards that we go by, perhaps they can't. Maybe they can only appear in our world for 20 minutes at a time or something, and then they fuzz out, just like on the Outer Limits or something.
Yeah, perhaps.
Like
Tim,
that,
but before we burn up the hour, which we're really doing quickly, tell people once again about your websites, your books, what's going on with you, and where people can find out more.
Okay. If you want some straightforward interviews, DVDs of my travels around the country, interviewing some very fascinating people, my YouTube channel is Mr. UFO's Secret Files. Now, let me steer you to a couple of the good videos on there. One is an interview that I did in Sedona, Arizona with Tom Dongo. Now, Tom Dongo has a scrapbook full of unbelievable UFO photos and orbs. These are not just lights in the sky. There's a place in Sedona called the Bradshaw Ranch, which was bought a number of years ago by the military, so it's private property, but he was friends of the previous owner, and they set up camp there. They have these really, really great photographs, and he tells about all the mysterious things that go around happen in Sedona, and also Paul Davis, who was the producer of the Roswell Showtime movie, who has a very interesting video out now about the After Life project. It's about his continuing friendship with Forey Ackerman, who is a very famous publisher of Famous Monsters magazine, and who was an atheist, but apparently Forey has returned to contact Paul and other friends as well. Website, conspiracyjournal.com, and the free book, go to Amazon, UFOs, Wicked, This Way Come.
Excellent. Okay, Tim, I'm afraid we are out of time. It is always a great pleasure.
No, it's going to be another 5 years. I know it.
It will not be another 5 years. As a matter of fact, as soon as I have a chance tonight, I'm going to contact you about booking you for another show, because we've got to continue this. Great stuff.
All right. Well, Ben, you come down to Earth, and Paul, you just watch out for those cobwebs inside those haunted houses. And, maybe I'll run into you at a UFO show or something. I thought, geez, I haven't been in a studio, an actual radio studio. Next time I'm going to come in through your front door.
Oh, that would be wonderful. and we'll take you out to eat afterwards.
All right. I'm coming tomorrow.
Okay. We're not on the air tomorrow, but what the hey. Okay.
All right.
Tim, it's always great. Be in touch.
You guys are wonderful. And say hello to the audience and everybody in Woonsocket.
We will.
All right.
Okay. All right, folks. The great Tim Beckley.